pushing higher. They're pushing higher strongly. S&P futures higher every single day this week, but not just higher every single day this week, up more than 1% every single day this week. Also, you look at NASDAQ futures, for example, pushing higher once again this morning, up 2% yet again in the middle of the largest four-day rally since April. Even over in Europe, amid rising COVID cases, amid government restrictions, we see the stock 600 up for a fifth straight day. That's the longest streak since April. And the Hong Kong Hang Seng, if we want to put this in a global view, just came off of its best day since July. Meanwhile, volatility just really coming in. The VIX dropping from a rock, dropping like a rock. It was up above 40 just last week. Now you look at the VIX right there, 26.93. Those short VIX bets are very much paying off. It was just a couple of weeks ago that we saw that put-call ratio on the VIX spike to a record high. Meanwhile, we see the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index lower for a third straight day at the lowest since May 2018. As TD Securities' Mark McCormick put it, it's likely short-term that the U.S. dollar trades lower on the easing of geopolitical uncertainty. Meanwhile, gold is in the middle of its best week since July, and the 10-year just dropping too as those reflation bets come off. Now, speaking of those reflation bets coming off, that also means that that secular growth trade is just back in vogue, and we see that with tech flying higher. Yesterday, the worst day for Russell 1000 value versus growth since 2001, as Dave Mazza over at Direction put it, the worst day for regional banks versus the S&P ever. That's including the global financial crisis. If you look at NASDAQ futures this week on track, just about matching the best rally since 2008. You see it right there. John, as you so eloquently put it on Twitter, a chunky 9% rally.
Yeah, 9% is just chunky these days, given what we've seen over the last several months, the last 9 months. Sarah, thank you. About 24 minutes away from that opening bell, equities up nicely. The election spilling into a third day while America continues waiting and the markets continue rallying, seeing a bullish setup for risk assets.
The market is digesting what appears to be a split Congress and appears to be a little bit of gridlock.
Gridlock is good.
The market's now pricing in divided government.
That pushes markets higher.
In the markets is a endorsement of divided government.
It is quite amazing to see this rally across the board.
It's been a really strong rally.
This massive outperformance of the NASDAQ.
The rally in risk assets.
I actually find some of the risk assets, some of the yielding assets much more attractive.
People are trading on hope right now.
Things are continue to be incomplete and we just have to wait.
Equities are going to continue to have a good run.
Morgan Stanley's Mike Wilson joining us now on the phone for more. Mike, love catching up with you, and what a day for it as well. Mike, what's your read on the price action, not just of the last 24 hours, but of the last several days?
Yeah, thanks, John. Good to be with you here today. I mean, look, I think what's really interesting to watch is how the narrative changes, around the price action. A week ago, people were excited about a blue sweep, and now they're excited about gridlock, so let's make up our mind. Look, our view, whether it's right or wrong, I'm trying to be consistent with our clients, and I think we've been consistent in the last couple of months, that we think we're in a trading range for now, okay? We've had a huge move out the lows, all for good reason, right? The recovery's here, earnings revisions have been quite good, rates have remained under control, valuations have expanded, okay, great. So, here we are again, right back at the top end of our range, so I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to tell you that at 3,500, the risk reward's not that good again. Earlier this week, we put a note out on Monday morning telling clients to add down at those levels. And that's all we can really do in this environment is try to be disciplined around your entry points and not get whipped around by the price action and change your narrative based on that. So our narrative is the same, which is we think there's still some uncertainty as we go into year end. Some of it's around the election still, we don't know the outcome, but generally speaking, the election is going to get resolved, but we may have some uncertainty around that for another few weeks. We'll see. The other risk, though, is still, or uncertainty, is around the second wave, and that has not dissipated. All right, that's going to be with us for a while, and the vaccine and all that good stuff that's going to combat it. We just don't know yet. And so, from a valuation perspective, our framework is clear. Around 3,500, we're kind of full, and that doesn't mean we're bearish and we want to divest all of our investments. But we're trying to be disciplined in this consolidation period, which we think is going to persist kind of through the next month or so, and then we'll take our shots as the market comes to us, and we think we'll get more shots like that we got earlier this week.
Mike, I can only salute you for not coming up with a new narrative off the back of the price action, because I'm with you. I've been sitting here living it. Guests come and gone saying that the blue wave would be bearish, then it was bullish, and now divided government. is all good, if indeed that's what we get. And Mike, that's the story here. We're still counting. There are narrow pathways to a whole range of outcomes here down in Washington, D.C. I just wonder, on the conviction calls you have had over the last few months, the overweights that you've stuck with, financials, industrials, materials, how political dependent they are, how election dependent those calls are, Mike?
Well, I mean, clearly the political outcome will define, the magnitude of these moves. But like our primary narrative, as you know, John, has been that the business cycle, basically dominates the political cycle, particularly when you're coming out of recession. So if you believe that, as we still do, then you should still be skewing your portfolios towards pro-cyclical industries, okay, and stocks. Now, that includes some of the growth stocks, too. A good part of technology is pro-cyclical. So, you don't have to you can't just go all out of, growth and into value. That's not our call. Our call is that you want to be in securities, stocks that are levered to an economic recovery that's going to be, we think, somewhat explosive next year, no matter what the outcome is in the election, right? We're going to get more fiscal at some point. We're going to have a vaccine and other solutions for the virus, and there's going to be a massive reopening next year, and that's very constructive for the economy. So we want to have securities that are levered to that, and it may be some of the things that have not performed as well so far because they don't benefit from a lockdown. And that would be things like consumer services and cyclicals, things like materials and energy, and yes, even financials as rates we think ultimately will back up again, and things in the technology sector. One group that really popped yesterday that I do think changes things from the election outcome is healthcare. So the likelihood of universal healthcare looks unlikely, even if it ends up being a blue sweep because we don't know the outcome. The mandate for that in this election, I think, has been shot down. So I think, things like HMOs had a great day yesterday. It makes a lot of sense to us. Pharmaceuticals, biotech, things like that. And those have been held back by concerns about a blue wave. So that's an area I think, people should be looking at aggressively here, because they haven't really rebounded all the way.
Mike, always great to catch up with you. I appreciate your time, and I know you're busy this morning. We appreciate your time. Mike Wilson there of Morgan Stanley on this market, just sticking with it and not taking a price action and making a move and coming up with a new story. 20 minutes away from the opening bell, equities flying at a market desk with your movers. Here's Abigail.
John, well, the bulls certainly are running once again this morning, and with the big outperformance for the NASDAQ 100 up more than 2%, not surprisingly, tech is really outperforming. Qualcomm, in fact, is surging. They put up a monster quarter, beating both revenues and earnings by double digits. Adjusted earnings were beat by 21%, but it's the outlook that folks love. They really raised it upbeat on booming demand for 5G. AMD and other chip names are also up strongly. And then the big tech companies, the biggest companies in the world, Apple and Microsoft, continue to be bid up as investors want in on this year's defense. In fact, you and Sarah were talking about that chunky gain for the NASDAQ 100 E-minis, up 9% this week. Investors going toward 2020 defense, John. This is what's been working. So in the face of uncertainty, they are going right back to this year's winning trade, really up in a big way this week, John.
Abigail, thank you. Coming up, political gridlock potentially coming in Washington, D.C. We'll be catching up with JP Morgan's Bob Michael to discuss the possible market implications. That's next. This is Bloomberg.
Women leaders were actually better at controlling the deaths from COVID-19. Do you think out of this pandemic, we'll see more countries be willing to elect female leaders?
When we look at women leaders, we tend to project on them baggage that they shouldn't bear.
Women are given an opportunity when no one else wants to do the job.
Women had a very clear objective. They wanted to save lives.
The women leaders, if you look at their careers, have also built up a level of trust.
In fact, women have to be better at communication in order to be elected as leaders, whereas this doesn't hold true for men.
We need to get those sexist stereotypes out of our head and give women a fair run for leadership.
Trying to change the stereotypes about women is not only the business of women, but men have to be part of it.
We explore the trends, investments, and competition of the European ETF industry. Join us on Bloomberg ETF IQ Europe.
I think what we've seen during this period of time is that communicating via video is not a fad. We are using it in all aspects of our lives, for work, for learning, for communicating, for staying in touch.
We need another rescue package. Hopefully the partisan passions that prevented us from doing another rescue package will subside with the election. And I think we need to do it, and I think we need to do it before the end of the year.
The US election likely delivering gridlock to Washington, D.C., potentially opening the window for an elusive deal on another stimulus package. The size of that, very much up in the air. Bloomberg Michael McKee joins us right now with the latest. Good morning to you, Mike.
Good morning to you, John. It does look like something is possible since Mitch McConnell is weighing in. Remember, during the entire stimulus negotiations throughout July and August and September, he stayed out of it. He let the White House take the lead, but now that he's thrown the Senate's willingness to consider something into the mix, it is possible we could see some progress once the lame duck session starts. Now, we don't know how much oxygen any fights over the presidency will take out of Washington, but if the two sides can get together, there is probably a good chance we get something before the end of the year. Remember, December 31st is when all of the CARES Act programs for the unemployed expire.
Mike, great to catch up. Thank you, sir. Let's bring in JP Morgan's Bob Michael for more, shall we? Bob, great to have you with us on the programme. Appreciate your time this morning. Can we just start with this bond market and this epic rally we've seen over the last couple of days?
Sure. Hi, John. I love the way you set it up for Mike Wilson. The equity market could do no wrong. You have a blue wave, you price in tremendous fiscal stimulus. You have gridlock, you price in tremendous monetary accommodation. It's entirely different scenarios for the bond market. If we had a blue wave and we had the fiscal stimulus, you're talking about yields up at around 1.25%. With gridlock, the only game in town is going to be the Fed, and you're talking about yields going back to about 0.5% and staying there for a long period of time.
Bob, what we're seeing playing out for me is just unreal. The move in the bond market, I can understand that. I think if you told me this is how it would play out after the election, bid into treasuries, I'd get all of that. To see the rally in high yield, to see the rally in triple Cs as well. Bob, what's behind that?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that are behind this, and we'll hear from Jay Powell later today. I never thought, and I've been doing this now close to 40 years, that I would see central bankers one after another begging governments to borrow and spend. But that's what we're seeing. And that keeps economic activity afloat at some level while the recovery continues to progress. And you also have all the credit backstops across the market. So investors are stepping back. They're saying, do I want to invest in government bonds with somewhere between a 0 and a 1% yield? Or do I want to go into corporate bonds? And you look at the U.S., there are still 330 million consumers that are consuming day after day. Sure, we know the problem areas of the market. We know travel and leisure. We know retail. We know some of the property market. All of that will go through restructuring, but there are still large parts of the credit markets that will be okay, that will be money good, and that's where investors want to put money to work. Yeah, I'd like investment grade credit to yield 4 or 5%, not 2%. I'm not going to get that.
We all would. We'd all like much higher yields than that, Bob. And as you've pointed out many times over the last several years, maybe it's never coming back with the exception of the rout we had back in March. The president's tweeting right now, Bob, and the president is saying stop the count. The count continues, but the president is saying stop the count. The big fear a few months ago was a contested election. I don't see any signs of fear right now, Bob. Why do you think that is? And how do you think market participants will process this if this is the direction of travel for the next several days, maybe even several weeks?
So having lived through all this 20 years ago, a contested election caught us all off guard. Nobody anticipated that. This time, it's been pretty well telegraphed. Everyone accepts that it could be contested, but at some point, all the votes will be counted, they'll be recounted, and there will be an outcome. And right now, the markets are of the view that we're going to have a split government, we're going to have a Biden presidency, and we're going to have a Republican Senate. And I don't think anything's going to shift the narrative away from that over the next few days.
Well, let's talk about the narrative for the next few years and talk about whether the politics is actually relevant here, Bob. You're looking for lower rates, lower trend growth, a trajectory similar to the post-crisis environment of a decade ago. Bob, does anything about what is happening in politics right now change that for you?
Sure. I think we're seeing some of that now. I mean, you touched on earlier that we're seeing Mitch McConnell open the door to negotiations of a fiscal pact before year end and potentially before a new administration. I think that Washington gets it. It's not a 4-year cycle. It's a 2-year cycle, and the midterm elections are only 2 years away. So you have to start doing something. I think you're going to see moderate help. I don't think you're going to see anything of the magnitude of what we're seeing in the UK, but enough to keep things ticking along until a reopening process can happen in conjunction with the vaccine. I think the bond market will like that. I think they'll feel the Fed will play its part. I certainly do. And yields will stay stable.
Bob, I'd like to whip through this price action with you just quickly. We've talked about the bond market. Let's talk about foreign exchange quickly. 9 minutes away from the opening bout for cash equities. Equities are up nicely. We know that story. What is new here is just the amount of dollar weakness flushing through the FX market. And Bob, I know a big conversation people are having at the moment is how much international exposure they should be putting on at this point. Bob, are you thinking about that a little bit more in the last 24 hours?
Yeah, we are. We've liked emerging market debt for a while because of the high real yields and the aggregate policy spots on the monetary, fiscal, and healthcare side in some parts of the world. When you look at a potential Biden administration, suddenly you start pricing in perhaps more palatable trade negotiations, less severe rhetoric, and more compromise down the way. When we look at countries like Mexico and think of the Mexican peso, it's at 20 now. Sure, it was about 21 before, but it used to trade before the trade wars at somewhere around 18, 19. I think we're headed back there. You look at Indonesian rupiah, it's rallied 4%. It could easily rally another 5 to 10%. So there's a lot of value in emerging markets, particularly in FX, if you have an administration that comes in that will dial down the rhetoric on trade.
Hey, Bob, great to catch up. As always, I know it's super busy for you all out there, and I appreciate any time you give me. Bob Michael there of JP Morgan. Thank you, sir. The Electoral College, the electoral votes, 264 to 214, if you include Arizona, to Joe Biden. The Associated Press does that, and we display that on our screen for you at 264, 214. The counting continues in Arizona. States like Wisconsin have already been called for Vice President Joe Biden. Michigan called for Vice President Joe Biden. What's left? Georgia, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and the president is saying stop the count. That's the latest tweet in the last 20 minutes or so. Stop the count. The counting continues. This price action continues. The lift continues in the equity market. Up next, your morning calls. And later, Wells Fargo's Chris Harvey weighing in around the opening bell. This is Bloomberg.
I'm David Weston. Bloomberg Television is reinventing one of the most iconic brands in financial television for a new audience. Join me to see the news program for the clever investor. This is Bloomberg Wall Street Week.
Going into the opening bell, equities up nicely. Over the last 3 days, a rally on the Nasdaq of 9%, just unreal. A beautiful morning in New York. Good morning to you all. Here are your morning calls. A look at some of the analyst recommendations on Wall Street. Citi upgrading Western Union to neutral, a 22 price target. The analyst seeing a number of positive developments, including the growth of its digital business. Your second call, JP Morgan upgrading Verizon to overweight, $65 price target. The analyst expecting growth to accelerate next year, fueled by new sources of revenue. And finally, Oppenheimer upgrading Microsoft to an outperform with a 260 price target. The analyst citing strength and resilience in the company's cloud computing business. They're your three calls. Coming up is the opening bell from London and New York this morning. Good morning. This is Bloomberg.
Ada 3 kelompok pengungsi tersebut yang sudah berpencar arah. Kemudian kami dari Polsek Banda Sakti berkoordinasi dengan perangkat desa Kampung Jomblang melakukan upaya pengumpulan secara persuasif serta minta tolong kepada warga. Alhamdulillah warga yang terpecah semuanya berkumpul.
Welcome to That's Debatable, an interactive series on today's most pressing issues. The resolution this time, is a U.S.-China space race good for humanity? We'll hear from both sides.
The competition, if you look at the past, led to innovation.
A whole new arms race could start. And we'll get your perspective, too, with help from the artificial intelligence of IBM Watson. I'm John Donvan. Join us for That's Debatable, presented by Bloomberg and Intelligence Squared, Friday on Bloomberg Television.
Valuations, particularly, sort of the technology landscape, have gotten to some pretty extraordinary levels. So I think it's not a surprise. I don't think it's any indication of the beginning of the end, but I do think markets don't like uncertainty.
This is a market that over the past few weeks has made it clear it wants to go higher. It got a little spooked by the idea that geopolitical tensions are rising.
You know how this works. You take the price move, you tell a nice, pretty story that fits nicely with the price action, and you call it the new narrative. I've got no idea where the confidence is right now in this market, but it's there, the confidence to push this market higher, much higher. Up 59 on the S&P, up 270 on the Nasdaq. We rallied 1.7% and 2.3% respectively on the session. On the week, we are flying. Switch up the board in the bond market. There is a Fed decision today. There is payrolls Friday around the corner as well. Not on the radar, I know. The counting continues. The president says stop the counting. Yields going nowhere on a 10-year after a big rally, 0.76% is your yield. Euro-dollar off session highs, but it's all about dollar weakness through G10, through EM, Euro-dollar 118 and around about 27. And in the commodity market, we pull back a little bit, 38 handle on WTI, $38 and around about 90 cents. That's the cross-asset price action this Thursday morning. Good morning to you all. At a market desk with your movers, here's Abigail.
John, let's break down this rally with stocks surging for a fourth day in a row despite the uncertainty around the election. But that does seem to be pushing investors toward this year's defense, or tech and big internet, those stay-at-home names, once again surging, including Microsoft and Facebook, up for yet another day. Big gains there. As for another top sector, that is healthcare. Interestingly, actually, Bristol-Myers just flipping slightly red earlier in the pre-market higher, but you can see with Cardinal Health up 4.4%. Yesterday, healthcare, one of the top sectors on the day, as the Democrats do not have the blue sweep. Lots of analysts saying that is a positive for healthcare. So the top two sectors on the morning right now, tech and healthcare, those are some of the movers. Let's now, John, take a look at names we wouldn't normally look at, but they have to do with the election. We have some big gains here. Tilray, the cannabis company, up 14%. This after marijuana was legalized in a number of states. We also have DraftKings surging up about 5% after legalized betting, sports betting was made legal in 3 states, perhaps setting the way for more states to approve. And then finally, John, Riot Blockchain is up 6.3%. If you can believe it, Bitcoin is one of the election winners this week, up about as much as the NASDAQ 100, up about 9%, up for a 5th week in a row. But as for the big names, it's all about tech and healthcare, John.
Abigail, thank you. The only mention Bitcoin will get on this program. I know so many people have reached out to me to talk about Bitcoin. I'm not going to talk about Bitcoin right now. It's amazing, isn't it, this situation? If I described it to you about 30 days ago, you wouldn't have put equities here. There's no way you would have put equities here. You might have put the bond market here, but you wouldn't have put stocks here. You wouldn't have put credit here either. But here we are. We are up by another 1.5%. Information technology leads the gains, up about 2.36%. You will be told there is a defensive tilt to the equity price action. There is. On top, information technology. At the bottom, energy, financials not doing great either over the last couple of days. This morning, up about 1% off the back of the bond market move in the last 24 hours. A really difficult environment for the financials. The president says stop the count. The counting continues. What amazes me is that markets and market participants are just focused on the counting, the numbers, and not the rhetoric. But the rhetoric is really heating up. Markets preparing for government gridlock, investors debating the potential market implications.
The Republican carrying in the Senate is a major surprise.
Higher taxes, and particularly higher corporate taxes, are off the table.
Major impact for the markets.
The Senate Republicans will revert to their more fiscal conservative roots.
Maybe we get less stimulus.
The market is now pricing in something different.
Maybe there won't be tax increases.
The Senate staying Republican was a really big deal.
What the market is doing is basically looking at the bright side of the story.
The market is taking it all on the positive side.
That 7 percentage point tax increase could have been about a 10% headwind.
The market wants to go higher. The market is going higher. With more, Bloomberg's Scarlett Fu. Hey, Scarlett.
Hi, John. Yeah, the narrative shifted really quickly here to a Democratic president and a Republican-controlled Senate would mean less fiscal spending and also fewer, if any, tax hikes and a lighter touch on regulation. And all this is positive for tech. NASDAQ futures building on this week's gains. And the price action in yesterday's cash market showed that the equity rally was very narrow. The S&P 500's gain of 2.2% came on negative breath. Another big winner, as Abigail alluded to, is healthcare, mainly on the idea that a divided government won't expand Obamacare and pursue lower drug prices. But there's also relief because tech and pharma were most at risk if a Democratic-controlled government were to increase taxes on repatriated earnings. According to Bloomberg Intelligence, Apple, Alphabet, P&G, they all have multiple billions of dollars left to pay of their repatriation tax because the tax is payable in installments over the next few years. Biden's proposal included raising that and, of course, boosting the corporate tax rate to 28% from 21%. Goldman had estimated that Biden's tax plan would cut S&P 500 earnings by 9% in 2022 and more fully in 2023. As for other asset classes, a tax increase would have hurt EM currencies, supporting the dollar. Instead, we're seeing the U.S. dollar fall for a 4th straight day today, losing 1.5%. If we get tax hikes, that could send treasuries even lower, treasury yields even lower. Yields have come down more than inflation expectations because massive fiscal stimulus is off the table, easing budget concerns. A higher tax rate could strengthen the government's checkbook even more. In addition, for investors, if you buy treasuries, you get a tax haven. An increased tax rate would prompt a flight into tax shelters. John?
Scarlet Fu, so much to work through. Quite clearly, this market is looking on the bright side of life. If you're tuning in, here are the scores. So we're at 264 to 214. 264 for Joe Biden, including Arizona and the 11 electoral college votes there. If he keeps them, what does he need? He needs another 6 to get over the line. So what do you get 6 from? Well, you get 16 from Georgia. Georgia, a conversation right now. Josh Wingrove, good friend, reporter here at Bloomberg, reporting the following. Mailed ballots are so far 65% Democrat. Trump's lead is about 18,500 with 51,000 in and around votes still to count. If Biden can get 65%, Trump retains his lead. But if they're from Democrat places and Biden gets 70%, he takes the lead. So it's really, really close in places like Georgia. Places like Georgia that you wouldn't have expected several months ago to go this way, but it's a nail-biter. It's really, really narrow. The counting continues in Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and elsewhere, and the president says, stop the counting. The counting continues. This equity market rally continues as well. Chris Harvey of Wells Fargo advising investors to pay close attention to the Senate, writing, quote, with everyone focusing on the White House, we believe control of the Senate is more important to equity investors. Whomever controls the Senate will control taxes and have a stronger input on fiscal stimulus. Chris joins us right now for more. Morning, Chris. We caught up yesterday. Continuation of the same theme, sir. Just get behind this equity move. Your thoughts this morning?
So you've talked a lot about the equity markets moving up no matter what. And what I would say about that is, let's take a look what's occurred over the last few weeks. What's occurred over the last few weeks is we had a blue wave. That blue wave was a certainty. We had a situation with the presidential election cycle where one candidate was well ahead of the other. And what we were saying into that is, this is a much closer race than you expect. This is going to be a coin toss, and we have to reprice risk. And you have to see volatility go up, and you have to see equity prices come down into election day. That's what occurred. Now what's occurring is we have some certainty. We're having a higher degree of certainty. And so equity markets are starting to rally. Equity markets are believing that Biden has won the presidency. We'll see. It's still to be decided, but that's what the market's telling you. And we're rallying on the certainty. I think 7% or what appears to be 7% once we open might be a little too much. And so we want to fade this rally. But underneath all of this is pretty good fundamentals. We think the economy is much better. We think the consumer is much better. And valuations in many places, not all places, are reasonable.
If fundamentals are better and valuations are better, why are we piling into tech, Chris?
So we're piling into tech. So it was a couple things. Again, we have to look at the short term. We have to look at the long term. In the short term, we had a type of sell the news. In addition to that, you had a blue wave. That blue wave was going to cause reinflation. Reinflation was going to cause this massive rotation, and it did cause a rotation for a period of time. However, blue wave didn't materialize. So now we're taking the stimulus-inspired reinflation off the table. We have a repricing of we have a repricing of risk that way, but we have two other issues. In addition to that, people now think that investigations or regulation for tech are going to take a back seat. Moreover, President Biden or potentially President Biden is more prone to lockdowns, or is more likely he would like to lock down the country. Well, if that's going to occur, and we know that coronavirus is going higher, what do you want to trade into? You want to trade into the work from home type names, which are many of the tech names. So you have those three issues in the short term, but longer term, these things have really worked. These things have really performed. We think the economy is better, and you want to start rotating or using these names as sources of funds and rotating into more cyclicals.
Well, let's talk about those cyclicals. Whereabouts, Chris? Treasuries rallying aggressively, yield curve flatter, not the greatest environment for the banks. They've suffered. Where do you want to go to?
Right. So where we want to go to is we want to go to transportation. We want some industrials. We really think you can pick up cyclicality anywhere. You can even pick up cyclicality with some of the REITs, things that are more tied to the consumer, more tied to retail. You can do it across the board. Within technology, what you want to do is you want to rotate into your semi and your semi-cap names away from your software. So when we talk about cyclicality, we can see it in every single sector, and it really depends on your risk tolerance and your time horizon.
Chris, always great to catch up. The new narrative that's doing the rounds, you and I have already joked about it. You're a good sport. You've let me poke fun at you. Chris Harvey of Wells Fargo. Thank you. We could continue. Let's get to the market desk with Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle for more. Hey, Abigail.
Hi there, John. Well, let's return to today's big trade that you were just talking about, and that is technology. As for some of the big gainers on the day, it actually has to do with earnings because Qualcomm is one of the best stocks here, and it is surging up about 12% at this point on a monster quarter. They beat estimates in a huge way, and they boosted their outlook on strong 5G demand. We also have Qorvo up sharply in sympathy, Apple and Amazon. We talk about them all the time, but the reason we do that is what's moving the markets. They have such a big weighting. Investors want in on this year's defense. As for some other earnings movers on the day, one of them, Cardinal Health, is in another top sector on this week, which is healthcare. Cardinal Health is popping on a strong quarter as well. They beat estimates. Expedia, the travel company, if you can believe it, they beat as well on relatively okay summer travel. And then finally, GM put up a great quarter. That stock being rewarded up 3.6%. The bulls, once again today, are out, John. Lots of movers to the upside.
Abigail, thank you. Coming up, a tightly contested election putting the pressure on the Fed with a rate decision coming this afternoon. That conversation up next with Crossmark's Victoria Fernandez. In this market, we're up on the day. On the NASDAQ on the week, we're up 9 percentage points. Biggest weekly gain potentially since April. From London and New York, as we continue to count the votes, this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Best, your weekly review of the most important business news, analysis, and interviews from Bloomberg Television around the world.
Ken Burns, welcome to Bloomberg Big Decisions.
We have always been a mixture of things. We are always stronger for that mixture.
Growth is a way to stay competitive, delight more and more consumers.
Welcome to the Best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang.
They've moved the needle by acknowledging that they have to monitor the content.
What is one word of advice you'll take with you?
Learn how to listen. And that is certainly something that has served me well.
Ankiti, where do you go from here? It's a huge market. It's a huge opportunity. I want to go 100x from here.
Our philosophy is to partner where we can and stand apart when we should.
We've learned this year from our experiences with earlier bouts of COVID that it's important that we act both quickly and that we do act clearly in scale. It was clear to us that actually 150 was a quantum of QE that delivered a sustainable path of inflation to meet the target.
Governor Bailey catching up with my good friend Guy Johnson a little bit earlier on this morning following a Bank of England that increases the QE programme. Chairman Powell could only dream of what Governor Bailey was managing to engineer today. He went first earlier this morning, 7 local time, increased QE. 5 hours later, Chancellor Sunak comes out. The Treasury does more stimulus, or at least offers that fiscal support through to March 2021. Chairman Powell, if he could today, I imagine he would love to do the same thing. Michael McKee's with us now. Mike, that is not an option for Chairman Powell, is it?
Not an option for Chairman Powell. I think we can safely say that Stephen Mnuchin is not going to be coming out a half hour after the Fed decision to announce additional fiscal action. But you know, the Fed has sort of the same problem that the Bank of England had. Neither one really knows what's going to happen with the economy, and each has their own unique issue to deal with in terms of the overall economy in their country. For the Bank of England, it was Brexit. Here in the United States, it's what are you going to do that you haven't already done when your fiscal authority is sort of sitting on its hands? We talked about earlier in the show, Mitch McConnell making some nice noises about a stimulus program, but a really big one is going to be hard to come by now. So you can expect Powell to ask for it, but probably not get it. The other problem that they have is the virus. They don't know what's going to happen. Remember, 100,000 cases yesterday for the first time. We're going exponentially higher right now. That'll determine how much the economy needs stimulus. We got a lot of warnings from doctors, and it's maybe showing up in the economic data. You look at jobless claims earlier today, and they had stayed extremely elevated, 751,000. And the forecast for jobs tomorrow is kind of interesting. The consensus remains 661,000, but look, that's because we have a very fat right tail. The real consensus in the middle there is 400,000 to 500,000. Wall Street at this point thinks we're going to come in with a low number. And that leaves the question for the Fed, what can you do with rates almost at zero right now? Bill Dudley said in a Bloomberg op-ed last week that they're pretty much out of tools. They can change the nature of what they buy longer ends, push down on the 10-year, but what kind of help is that really going to bring? You see what's happened in the markets over the last couple of days while we've been watching the election returns. Yields have just across the curve fallen. So the market is doing the Fed's job for them. There isn't much left for them to do at the zero rate. It's up to the fiscal authorities, so maybe that's what the main message of Jay Powell is going to be today.
Spreads are tighter, the dollar's weaker, Treasury yields are lower, the equity market's higher, financial conditions super loose. Mike, great to catch up, sir. Thank you. At the moment in this bond market, the curve's been flatter the last couple of days. The front end of the yield curve just pinned to the floor. The elephant sitting on top of that, the Federal Reserve. Think of that as the hinge that everything pivots on the long end. 10's up, 10's down, 30's up, 30's down. That's your yield curve right there. Steeper, Monday, Tuesday, flatter, Wednesday into Thursday. Crossmark's Victoria Fernandez expecting a steeper yield curve following the election. She writes the following: removing uncertainty from the market in the form of the election will allow the longer end of the curve to move higher. We could see a one handle on the US 10-year by the end of the year. Victoria joins us now. So Victoria, if you had that trade on, you got hurt the last 24 hours and hurt pretty badly. Why do you think that develops over time?
Morning, Jonathan. Well, when we look at some of the technicals, some of the stochastics that we see in the market right now, well, and especially at the beginning of the week, you know, we've had this triangle pattern go with the U.S. 10-year Treasury back in September, beginning of October. And looking at the breakout from that, it tells you should be closer to 1%. Look at some of the other ratios people compare the 10-year yield to. Cyclicals versus defensive. That's telling you should be closer to a 1.3, 1.4 on the 10-year. Industrial metals versus precious metals. That's telling you we should have a one handle on the 10-year Treasury. Now, if you and I had this conversation 2 mornings ago, I would have said we had a much better chance of getting there sooner rather than later. Obviously, we've seen 10-year yields pull back quite significantly since the election on Tuesday. Earlier, you said this is the longest Tuesday night ever, and I'm in that with you there. But I think it's important to see that the 40-day moving average on the 10-year is at 74 basis points. So the fact that we're still staying above that gives us a little bit of optimism that we're going to continue to creep back higher as we get through this uncertainty of the election and we get through COVID. We really think COVID is going to drive the markets longer term. It goes back to what Powell was saying a couple months ago in regards to the pandemic, and we think that's still true.
So this is a COVID call, Victoria. It's not an election call.
It's not an election call. You know, 4 months ago, we had a presentation with some clients in regards to what the election meant to the markets. And our conclusion was it doesn't mean a lot in the long term. Yes, there's going to be knee-jerk reactions, and we're seeing that this week as we decide who the actual president is going to be and have the divided Congress, which the markets actually like. But it comes back longer term to what's going to happen with COVID. That's going to decide how we open up across the country. That's going to decide what kind of stimulus packages we get, that's going to decide how the Fed and Powell move forward. So to us, we have to take a step back from the election, even though that has really been the central focus over the last couple of days, and realize that COVID is really what's driving this market and this economy. Even though the fundamentals continue to be pretty strong, that's where you need to place your bets for your portfolio, is on longer-term COVID outlooks.
Victoria, great to catch up with you, to get your insight and clarity on the call. Victoria Fernandez there on this bond market. Really difficult call, difficult to get past what's happening with the election before our eyes. Greece joining the lockdown, England joining the UK going into lockdown overnight here in London. That's the latest story. I have to say, being on the road's still pretty busy relative to where things were back in spring. Looking at the pictures, not the same story, I have to say. Let's see how that develops in the coming days. But clearly in the United States, that's a story we need to focus on as well. We always talk about the shark closest to the boat, and quite clearly the shark closest to the boat is this election. We count. We still have narrow paths for a whole series of outcomes. We continue that count. But outside of that, cases are increasing. The question's being asked, will consumers disengage? Will companies lose confidence? What will that do to the trajectory of this recovery? It was good to see the manufacturing ISM earlier this week. Still buoyant, still nice. The ISM services number coming in, though, and the employment component, just a little bit softer. And I know a lot of you are looking at the same thing. Are we losing that momentum going into year-end on that particular story? Let's get to the sector price action of this market move. What a move the last couple of days. Here's Abigail.
It certainly is, John. We have the S&P 500 up about 7% this week, heading to its best week since April. But it's super interesting. Mike Wilson was talking about that trading range earlier, about 3 months. The S&P 500 hitting right up to the top. Resistance. Will the sellers push the S&P 500 back down? Not happening right now. If we go into the Bloomberg and use the IMAP, we will see all 11 sectors are higher. So it is risk on. But making it interesting is we have a blend between the cyclical and the defense of technology. Up top, materials up 3.3%. Tech right behind it up 3.1%. Then discretionary, industrial. So again, a blend. But most sectors are up more than 1%. So this week's big rally continues. On the week, John, it's even more interesting because not only is it cyclicals and defense, it's also healthcare. That's true defense, up 8.2%, really being helped out by Biogen, soaring this week, up 35% on an Alzheimer's drug. But you have Cigna up 26%, Anthem up 19%, having to do with the rhetoric around a blue wave not happening. Then the industrials, then communication services, that's big internet, Facebook, Alphabet, Netflix. And then the industrials behind that, not on the board, John, is tech, but tech is up in a big way, too. So the bulls are out, but these rotations are still investors jockeying to see which one wins out, growth or value. Probably it's going to take some more time, John.
There's some confidence out there about something. I'm not sure what right now. Abigail, thank you. Coming up, the market moving events you need to be watching. That'll be next in our trading diary. For our audience worldwide, 23 minutes into the session. This equity market just absolutely ripping on the S&P 500, on the NASDAQ, up by another 2.5%, on the S&P up 2%. Story for me, though, has got to be in the FX market. Just some dollar weakness flushing all the way through G10, all the way through EM. The Chinese currency, the one to watch. And I know so many of you thinking about the same theme. My international exposure, how big does that need to be based on what could happen in the next 24 hours or so in the United States of America? The counting continues. In America, that's where our focus is. In New York, what a beautiful morning in New York City. Equities up. This is Bloomberg. 264, 214, they are the scores. If you give Arizona to Vice President Joe Biden, the Associated Press has done. Georgia, counting continues, it's tight. Nevada, counting continues, it's tight. North Carolina still hasn't been called, counting continues. Pennsylvania, the counting continues. This market, though, just keeps on rallying. The S&P 500 up 2%, the NASDAQ up by 2.5%. For our audience worldwide, make sure you're with us tomorrow as our election coverage continues. What a lineup of guests we've got for you. Mark Kiesel of PIMCO, Mohamed Al-Arian, Rick Reeder of BlackRock, and Anastasia Amoroso of JP Morgan. That's the lineup on this market payrolls and this election. This is Bloomberg.
When opportunity knocks at the door, don't say, blimey, I've still got my pajamas on. Say yes to stuff and it will take you in interesting places.
We're clearly going through some very unusual times and, enormous difficulties getting groups of people to agree on things.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in the City of London, join us on Leaders with BlackRock.
What is happening today in India is actually a determination to rebuild our economy.
India has an opportunity not only competing in the space of the factory of the world, but a very big opportunity to compete in being the office of the world.
Months after Hurricane Maria, Puerto Rico is still in peril. Huge swaths of the island are still without power, running water, or access to medical care. Experts estimate that it will take years before these services are restored island-wide. Much of the blame has been placed on FEMA for a slow response in comparison to recent disasters on the mainland. But recovery from a disaster of this complexity and scale has proven more challenging than anyone anticipated. And filling the gaps between an overextended public sector and a suffering populace falls on the private citizens. Robert Anderson is a Puerto Rico resident of 4 years.
The eye of the storm came in south of El Yunque, swept up towards San Juan, and out to Arecibo. Everything on the right-hand side is what we call the dirty side of the storm.
This isn't his first time in a disaster zone. With a military and telecom background, Anderson worked on repairing damaged cell phone towers in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. Some might be tempted to label him a disaster capitalist, seeking lucrative government contracts for his expertise. But as Anderson finds himself in the middle of a humanitarian crisis, he and his associates are developing a variety of pro bono recovery projects that target the island's hardest hit areas.
I see two Puerto Ricos. We're here in San Juan. They have telecommunications restored. They may or may not have power, but basic services are in place. They're able to get food. They're able to buy things. They're surviving. And when you look outside of the San Juan area, you can go 15 minutes from here and find areas that are devastated. I'm working on the devastated side.
Today, he's put together a boots-on-the-ground mission to provide medical care to some of the island's most isolated and vulnerable residents. Steve Berenbaum is one of Anderson's business associates. He offered an extra car and a set of hands.
So we received an initial report from a nurse that was out in the area. We're headed to the northeast region of Utuado for some people that are in need of urgent medical assistance.
Dr. Sally Priester is a physician from San Juan. She filled a van with medical supplies at her own expense and brought along a team of nurses. Google Maps estimated our first destination to be a 90-minute drive. But it didn't account for obstacles like this. Our first stop was the home of an 82-year-old blind Vietnam veteran. His roof was blown off by the storm, and he's been living alone in a back shed for nearly 2 months.
His cane actually got broken in the storm, so he's limited mobility. He has a number of medical ailments. Dr. Priester's having a look at him. We called the VA. They're going to get him set up with what he needs, get him stabilized so he can then be transported either to an evacuation center or off the island. It's when the chain gets broken, when those families that are connected to them leave the island or take off, these guys get left at the end of the road, and it's tough.
FEMA was not officially part of Robert's team, and their arrival caught everyone by surprise. Their job here was to survey and report back to their superiors, and did not come with medical aid of any kind.
People think that FEMA is there to hand out bottles of water, and it's not what they do. FEMA has a role to play. They have a very specific role. They bring in ships, they bring in airplanes, they bring in tractor trailers with pallets of things. But they're a big machine, and there's gaps in that thing. And you're seeing one of the gaps here, and we help fill that role. These guys are in a bad situation before, and now they're struggling for real basic things. One of the risks that you run is people going from fear to hopelessness. Those are the folks that we're trying to reach.
And how are they reached? How are they even found?
Word of mouth, mostly.
And what's your role in all this?
Ghost in the machine. I'm lucky enough to be able to communicate with folks in FEMA, the state of Puerto Rico.
For a ghost, Robert makes his presence well known. Not only was he the de facto leader of the mission, now with FEMA in tow, he created his own maps to survey storm damage.
So we're right here.
And delivered them to FEMA HQ free of charge.
I have pretty good reach.
Perhaps that's how he managed to earn himself a coveted FEMA badge without actually working for them. And it's these relationships that allow him to operate more efficiently than an NGO or a government agency.
We're able to resolve problems at a different level.
Our next stop was on a mountaintop, a family of 11 struggling to care for their special needs brother in what was left of their house.
Probably we are the first health team to come and visit this family.
Muy bien, todo muy bien.
The patient has Down syndrome. He is all day in bed. The difficulty with this is the patient cannot be alone. The most important thing is that you need to take care of the chronic disease besides disability, because they have been not going to a doctor, and no doctor has come in here yet.
So we need a refill of this medication?
After maybe 54 days, it's not getting better. And the only way that you can be able to see that is coming to the ground, drive, and see the people and talk to the people.
You can see San Juan from here, but you can't get there. It's like the Emerald City.
this stop, we caught word that a man living alone at the edge of the jungle was in need of care.
So we decided to take a little detour, come up here and check out and see what's going on. One of the challenges is to find those people that are at the end of these roads that need help.
¿Pero por qué estás solo? ¿Por qué estás por acá tan solo? I'm asking about why he's alone right here. He said things of life happens. Yeah, I'm here by myself. So ¿dónde vive acá? En la parte de... This is not a job. If you do this, you need to have passion for what you can do. You're not going to get paid.
It's said in disaster response and emergency response that the real first responders are your neighbors. You don't need to wait for a lucrative FEMA contract to go out and do good and to help the community.
In the end, do you feel like you're making a difference?
Lives you touch and people that you can affect. I don't really think about it in those terms.
But why do you do it?
It helps me sleep at night. I think it's as much for the people that are going out to help and do things as it is for the people that you affect.
Whether out of altruism, or the lure of a paid gig, or some mixture of the two, Anderson hopes to stay here to help shape Puerto Rico's future.
Puerto Rico's essentially been a colony for 400 years. It was treated poorly by the Spanish. It was not treated well by the United States when they first got here. Puerto Rico can continue in the way that it's always been, or Puerto Rico can rebuild itself like nothing that's ever been. And we have to do everything we can to make that real. That's the bottom line.
When I met him first online, I found him to be really sweet. I think I was the one who was talking for an hour. He was just listening.
When we met, I saw her. She was beautiful, intelligent, and kind, which was, something that I was looking for.
Anshu and Sumit are one of about 12 million couples that get married in India every year. Unlike their parents' generation, they're not from two close villages, but from two cities on opposite sides of the country. And their love didn't start through community matchmaking, marriage brokers, or classified ads in newspapers, but began online.
So we met through jeevansati.com. So it's basically an online portal where we have detailed profile of different grooms and brides.
It makes a lot of remote profiles who are located in distant areas more accessible.
Thanks to growing internet and smartphone usage, matrimony websites and apps in India are starting to disrupt the matchmaking industry. More and more people are finding their partners at the click of a mouse. jeevansati.com, where Anshu and Sumit met, is one of the biggest players. Young Indians looking for love set up profiles including their caste and horoscope, but their criteria for choosing spouses appears to be changing.
We have seen the shift from traditional caste community conservative parameters to something like which is more focused on education, employment.
Anshu and Sumit's marriage was initiated by their parents, but modern Indian couples like them have more input than previous generations.
We looked up to them to agree for the proposal, but it was primarily our decision that we wanted to be with each other.
So what's the emoji you use the most to send to each other?
So there's a bear which basically we use for indicating a hug.
Yeah, that's our language basically, bear icon for a hug.
Time flies when you're in love, and just 1.5 months after they first met online, the couple got engaged. They decided to hold their wedding less than 3 months later. But planning a traditional Hindu wedding on such short notice is no easy task. The massive event usually lasts 3 days, has various ceremonies and celebrations, and involves the entire two families and hundreds of guests. Luckily, there are websites and apps for that.
We searched online, we got in touch with Wedding Brigade, and they helped us finalize the venue. And it makes the search faster and efficient.
Startups like the Wedding Brigade are challenging traditional wedding planners in this $50 billion industry. It provides various services from booking banquet venues to buying wedding gowns. The website makes money by charging commission from vendors.
People don't want to be limited to what is available around them. They want to know the entire range of options available before making a decision. And now it's easy to find almost everything on one portal.
Anshu and Sumit are officially married in a ritual that has gone on for thousands of years, but their love started in a very new way. Technologies might be changing the way couples meet, date, and get married in India, but they're definitely not changing everything.
The technology was only the first level help that we could get to find each other. Everything else was like very humanly and emotions and feelings based.
Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren has become a symbol of everything the Republican Party stands against.
Everyone gets a right to basic health care. We need strong oversight of these banks.
A legal scholar and a consumer advocate turned politician, Warren has branded herself as a champion of the working class and made a career out of standing up to big business. While rumors of a 2020 presidency bid remain just that,
I'm not running for president.
her Senate seat is up for re-election in 2018, and Republicans are already pumping millions into super PACs to defeat her. This is the story of how a law professor and politician came to be seen as the biggest threat to Republican values and the greatest hope for progressive America. Elizabeth Warren was born Elizabeth Ann Herron, the youngest of 3 siblings, on June 22, 1949 in Oklahoma City to middle-class parents. After waiting tables to help her family pay the bills, Warren became a star on the high school debate team. She landed a scholarship to George Washington University at the age of 16, but 2 years later dropped out to marry her high school sweetheart, Jim Warren. By 1980, Warren was a mother of 2, divorced and remarried, had earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Houston, a juris degree from Rutgers, and practicing law in New Jersey. Warren then went on to become an influential law professor, teaching, lecturing, and publishing highly cited work on bankruptcy and commercial law at 7 universities around the country, eventually settling at Harvard Law School. But Warren wasn't always a liberal lion.
Elizabeth Warren used to be a Republican, actually.
That's Stephen Dennis.
I'm a Senate reporter for Bloomberg. Around the time that Elizabeth Warren switched parties, she became a fierce opponent of a Republican drive to make it much harder to file for bankruptcy. She fought that for a decade. It ended up passing anyways.
While her efforts ultimately failed, her warning calls were heard in 2008.
We're in the midst of a serious financial crisis. Our entire economy is in danger, and without immediate action by Congress, America could slip into a financial panic, and a distressing scenario would unfold.
Professor Warren was tapped to help with oversight in the government bailout.
She would excoriate bankers and their bonuses and their practices.
Why should the U.S. taxpayer alone carry Citi?
She proposed a series of tough regulations, which became the basis for much of the Dodd-Frank financial law that we have today. That sort of catapulted her to national stardom, particularly among the progressive left.
Encouraged by her newfound notoriety, Warren declared her bid for the U.S. Senate on September 14, 2011. During the race, her opponent Scott Brown tried to derail Warren by accusing her of falsely claiming Native American heritage, a controversy that earned her the nickname Pocahontas. Nevertheless, she was victorious and won the Senate seat by a comfortable margin. She used her new tenure to challenge everyone, from banking regulators and Treasury officials to members of Wall Street and Congress.
I'm really concerned that too big to fail has become too big for trial. We need tough new laws to hold corporate executives personally accountable. No one should be above the law.
She called for Wells Fargo CEO John Stump to resign for fraud, introduced the Bank on Student Loans Fairness Act, and reintroduced the 21st Century Glass-Steagall Act. In 2016, after staying silent during the Democratic primary battle, Warren finally endorsed Hillary Clinton and had some harsh words for candidate Trump.
Donald Trump is a loud, nasty, thin-skinned fraud who has never risked anything for anyone, and that is just one of the many reasons he will never be president of the United States.
But she was wrong.
The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
Warren wasted no time resisting Trump's agenda.
Have you ever managed or overseen a $1 trillion loan program?
I have not.
How about a $1 billion loan program?
I have not.
Okay. In the Donald Trump era, Elizabeth Warren has been playing defense and trying to prevent Donald Trump and his cabinet appointees from rolling back protections that she helped enact.
Warren actually found herself rebuked by Mitch McConnell for reading a letter by Coretta Scott King about Jeff Sessions' record on racism during his confirmation.
She was warned. She was given an explanation. Nevertheless, she persisted.
That moment became something that's on T-shirts, bumper stickers, slogans, and that really galvanized a lot of support for her. It's been very hard for Republicans to get much of anything done this year, and that's at least in part to this resistance movement that Elizabeth Warren has helped champion.
We are here to fight back.
Enough of Elizabeth Warren. Like you,
millions of dollars are being funneled to defeat Warren in the midterm elections in 2018. But it's the rumors of a 2020 presidential bid that has further prompted powerful donors to fund her opposition, often using the same playbook of constant and ruthless ad campaigns that many believe helped Trump win in 2016. It's anyone's guess if she will endure what Hillary could not.
You know, the question for Elizabeth Warren is whether she can go from being a liberal firebrand to somebody who can regularly get 60 votes for initiatives in the Senate and 218 in the House and drive an agenda, and whether she can bring together coalitions for political victories. That's the challenge, and we'll see what happens.
Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London, has made some powerful opponents.
He doesn't know me, never met me, doesn't know what I'm all about. I think they're very rude statements, and frankly, tell him I will remember those statements.
My message to Donald Trump and his team is that, your views of Islam are ignorant.
He's the first Muslim mayor of a major Western capital and proud of it. This is how Sadiq Khan went from the son of Pakistani immigrants to a lawyer, lawmaker, and now the mayor of London. Khan's parents emigrated from Pakistan. His father was a bus driver, his mother a stay-at-home seamstress. The 10-strong Khan family squeezed into a 3-bedroom flat in South London. He wanted to be a dentist, but TV in the 1980s convinced him otherwise.
Objection!
LA law with its swagger and ill-fitting suits caught Khan's eye. He graduated in 1991 with a degree in law from North London University and joined a human rights firm. Khan worked a number of high-profile cases, often clashing with London's Metropolitan Police Force. But he had bigger political ambitions.
This is what being a new MP is like, squatting on a bench in the absence of an office, dealing with letters from constituents.
Reports are just coming in of an explosion here in London.
And there's just explosions, and then it was just smoke everywhere.
Everyone's just asking what's happened.
Only 2 months after Khan entered the Commons as a Member of Parliament, London was attacked by Islamist extremists.
That day will stay with me for the rest of my life.
He spoke out against the attacks both as a London MP and as a Muslim.
He has been very clear about his opposition to violence, opposition to terrorism, and has set out to make the case for a more open and peaceful Islam.
That's Thomas Penny, one of Bloomberg's Westminster correspondents.
Here is a man who is a Muslim, and he is standing up and being open and straightforward and being clear that the problem here is not Islam, but it's Islamic extremism.
In 2015, a decade after the attacks, Khan ran for mayor of London, and his faith was back in the headlines. His opponent, Zach Goldsmith, trying to link Khan to radical Islam.
The debate got again personal and nasty. The Goldsmith camp has called Khan extreme and accused him of associating with, quote, those who seek to do our police and capital harm.
It's a pattern of behaviour.
Even the former Prime Minister David Cameron repeated the allegations.
He shared a platform with Sajil Shahid, the man who trained the ringleader of the 7/7 attacks and accused the United States of bringing 9/11 on themselves.
But the smears didn't stick.
Zach Goldsmith ran a very negative campaign that was based on what people knew was a lie.
This election was not without controversy. And I'm so proud that London has today chosen hope over fear and unity over division.
After taking the mayor's office with a comfortable majority, Khan has brought a business-like efficiency to the role, scrapping expensive vanity projects like the Garden Bridge and the new Routemaster buses, which cost £350,000 each. The former lawyer who used to fight the police in court is now praised for his close relationship with them.
I was talking to a very senior police officer in the Metropolitan Police who said there was a sea change when he went into City Hall, and the police were saying how much they welcomed this because they knew where they stood and it was more straightforward to work with. So he works like a lawyer, he works like a government minister.
Khan's kept his faith at the fore. He's an outspoken voice for moderate Muslims across the world.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
Now, by giving the impression that Islam and the West are incompatible, you're playing into the hands of the extremists.
The ongoing spat between Khan and US President Donald Trump escalated when Trump went after Khan, misquoting him on Twitter just hours after the terrorist attacks of June 3rd, 2017. Khan's now one of the most prominent Labour politicians in the UK. In fact, a recent poll of Londoners found Khan was more trusted to keep the country safe from terrorism than the Prime Minister or the Labour leader. His story of going from the son of an immigrant bus driver to the mayor of one of the greatest cities in the world plays well with Londoners. But can he appeal to the rest of the nation? Has Khan got his eye on the top job? And is the UK ready for a Muslim Prime Minister?
What does it take to change the world? A big army? A cure to a pandemic? A revolution? All of these take either a lot of people, thousands of hours, or massive amounts of space. But for Julian Assange, all he needs is one room, an internet connection, and the world will listen. Assange is located here, and more specifically, right here. And from that location, he's posted government secrets, classified documents, and leaked emails from some of the world's most powerful people. And in doing so, has been labeled a hero, a villain, a nihilist, and everything in between. This is how an Australian programmer sequestered in the Ecuadorian embassy in London became one of the most influential and notorious people in the world. Born in 1971 in Townsville, Australia, Assange has always been on the move. Living in over 30 homes by the time he was in his mid-teens, Assange, along with his mother and half-brother, finally settled down in Melbourne. His introduction to hacking started at 16 when he was given a Commodore 64, which he attached to a modem. He attended the University of Melbourne, where he studied programming, physics, and mathematics. He never graduated, but that doesn't mean he didn't get an education. By 1991, Assange hacked into the Pentagon, U.S. Navy, and other branches of the U.S. government. In 1996, he was caught by the Australian Federal Police and charged with over 30 counts of hacking and computer-related crimes. He didn't get any jail time, but he was fined $2,100.
I think the first taste of what would come later was the hacking that he did as a young programmer, and that really sort of foreshadowed a healthy skepticism of the use and abuse of technology by governments.
That's Vernon Silver.
I'm a reporter for Bloomberg's investigations team.
Assange's youth as a hacker laid the foundation for him to start WikiLeaks in 2006. But what is WikiLeaks? It's a website that posts unfiltered, usually classified documents. What separates it from every other media outlet is that they have no editorial hierarchy. With a publication like the New York Times, information comes in, they take that information, package it, then disseminate it for the public to see. WikiLeaks, however, cuts out the middleman.
WikiLeaks gathers information, most of it given to them anonymously. So what they're doing is really very simple. They get the information in one end from who gives it to them and out the other with sometimes minimal interference. Julian Assange is the leader of that, the mastermind, the creator, and really, because he thinks of it as a journalistic enterprise, the editor-in-chief.
But every story starts with a source, and Assange has some unconventional sources.
Julian Assange does not hack as far as we know. He is the recipient of people who are either insiders who give him secret documents or hacked emails from a foreign power.
That's Eli Lake.
I am a columnist for Bloomberg.
And there was no source bigger for Assange than Chelsea Manning, who used to be known as U.S. soldier Bradley Manning. In 2010, Manning provided Assange and WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of leaked government documents. WikiLeaks quietly began releasing the documents in February of 2010, then made big headlines in April by posting what is now known as the Collateral Murder Video.
Come on, fire!
It was a vivid, graphic video. It changed the debate on the Iraq War, and importantly, it put WikiLeaks on the map when they put it online, and they couldn't be ignored at that point.
And those leaks were just the beginning. They went on to post more than 90,000 leaked documents known as the Afghan War Logs, 390,000 documents known as the Iraq War Logs, and 250,000 private messages between diplomats called cables in what is now known as Cablegate. These leaks were met with very real ethical questions.
The problem with publishing those cables was that a number of confidential sources for U.S. diplomats who faced real danger when their names were exposed.
Then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton drove the point home that
every country, including the United States, must be able to have candid conversations about the people and nations with whom they deal.
Shortly after Cablegate, the Swedish government issued an arrest warrant for Assange on allegations of rape and molestation. He claimed the allegations were fabricated to get him extradited to the United States, a claim the U.S. government denied. Either way, Assange's next move was
to seek refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy, which really was the beginning of the new chapter in his life and what we're dealing with now, which is him being stuck in London.
What was supposed to be an office in an embassy is now Assange's self-imposed prison to this very day. But that doesn't mean he's slowed down. Since being trapped in the embassy, WikiLeaks has released files about Guantanamo Bay prisoners, Syrian political figures, and the draft to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And then came the 2016 U.S. election.
Thousands of leaked emails showed Democratic Party officials possibly plotting against Bernie Sanders in his race against Hillary Clinton.
Over the course of 68 days, WikiLeaks released 20,000 confidential Democratic National Committee emails. In terms of the presidential race, if you look right here, when Assange released the first batch of emails, Trump actually takes his first lead against Clinton.
I think we've had enough of the Clintons, in all fairness.
Once WikiLeaks started exposing secrets of the Democratic Party, Julian Assange became a hero to many on the right. Public opinion kind of flip-flopped.
WikiLeaks.
From the emails, we now know Hillary Clinton's campaign manager makes risotto, and also how the DNC squashed Bernie Sanders' campaign. One thing we don't know is who gave Assange the stolen emails in the first place.
Many leading Democrats say they suspect it was the Russians. They released an analysis from a private cybersecurity firm that had said it was the Russians.
But Assange claims
our source is not the Russian government, and it is not a state party.
So this is where we stand today. The public still doesn't know who provided the emails to WikiLeaks. Meanwhile, Assange is still running WikiLeaks and still releasing documents. In March 2017, he started publishing documents from the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence called Vault 7.
The CIA, the agency charged with finding and keeping our top secrets, can't keep its own secrets.
As long as Assange has a connection to the world, no government secret will be too far from exposure.
Julian Assange is still in the embassy. Maybe he'll leave, maybe he won't. Kind of regardless, his work has been done. He's changed the way people think about their governments, about their own secrets, about their own hackability, and really the world has changed because of him.
debuted, the 4G wireless we have today allowed people for the first time to hit the road and explore unknown places with only a smartphone for directions. When 5G arrives, it could enable driverless cars to take us there as well. 5G stands for 5th generation mobile networks or wireless systems. It's insanely fast and can accommodate a lot more connected devices. But the reason it's being called revolutionary is because 5G will allow connected devices to speak to each other as well as people.
Right now we're living in a world where really it's a one-way experience.
That's Bloomberg tech reporter Ian King.
The network talks to your phone, you look at your phone and access data, then you send something back to the network. What we're being told about 5G is that really for the first time we're going to see machines communicating with each other over mobile networks in a meaningful way.
5G could end up being 100 times faster than what we have now, with speeds that could reach 20 gigabits per second. In plain English, that means downloading a full-length HD movie in seconds. 5G will also increase total bandwidth, which we will need in order to accommodate the growing Internet of Things. We're talking about the class of devices like internet-connected refrigerators, thermostats, dog collars, but 5G will enable many, many more.
Things like your utility network, factories, where machines are just sat there not connected at all. Suddenly they're all going to be connected. Suddenly we're going to be able to have real-time monitoring. Other things like cars, like utility poles, like your light, the light poles.
But perhaps the biggest advance will be a huge reduction in communication lag time, known as latency. A network of driverless cars will need the speed of 5G to ping each other multiple times per second to avoid collisions. Near instantaneous data transfers could allow doctors to perform surgery remotely with a robotic scalpel. So how will all this work? First, you need to improve network density.
And that's just a fancy word for saying you put more towers out there. What we're being told is that's not actually the case with 5G.
The idea is 5G will not only use the existing mobile spectrum, but also tap into higher frequencies called millimeter waves. Millimeter waves can carry more data, but only travel short distances. This may mean you'll see a lot more of these base stations around town. And the new towers may have as many as 100 antenna ports, compared to about a dozen on 4G cell towers. So when will we get 5G? Getting 5G ready is expected to cost providers $275 billion over 7 years in the US alone. Look for the first 5G service to pop up in big cities sometime in 2019.
People think of Vladimir Putin, they think of capital P, power. And that's exactly the impression he creates. Whether it's physical power, firing different weapons, riding in various James Bond-esque modes of transportation, or tossing hapless opponents in judo. Or political power, ruling his own country with an iron fist, crushing his political opposition, or, most recently, being accused of meddling in foreign elections for his own benefit. This is how Vladimir Putin went from a poor, tough kid in Leningrad to a KGB spy to the very symbol of modern Russia. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin was born in 1952 in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg. His father was a factory foreman and his mother a homemaker. It is widely said that Putin's public-facing tough guy persona can be traced back to him getting into fights when he was younger, which paved the way for him to take up judo. After getting a law degree from Leningrad State University, Putin joined the KGB Foreign Intelligence Service. He spent 16 years in the KGB. When Putin returned to Russia, he began his political career.
He went to work for Anatoly Sobchak, who was then the mayor of St. Petersburg.
That's Leonid Bershidsky.
I'm a columnist at Bloomberg View.
Putin thrived in Sobchak's administration because
he was sort of considered pretty efficient city official at that time. He was very loyal to Sobchak.
So loyal and efficient that
he was noticed by Yeltsin's close circle.
And those people soon brought Putin over to Moscow to work in Yeltsin's administration, where he quickly climbed the political ladder.
Then, of course, he was promoted to Prime Minister of Russia.
That's Dmitry Trenin.
I am currently director of the Carnegie Moscow Center.
Around this time, Yeltsin and the people around him, the so-called family, decided that Putin would become Yeltsin's successor. And then this happened. The apartment bombings were carried out in 3 Russian cities, killing 293 people and injuring more than 1,000. Putin immediately accused Chechen separatists for the bombings and followed it up with action.
He was credited with having a very successful military campaign against the terrorists.
And it worked.
After that, he became an heir apparent in the eyes of the Russian people.
3 months later, Yeltsin resigned. And on his way out, a famous exchange.
He was getting into the car in the Kremlin, and the last words that he addressed to Putin before getting into his car was, "Take good care of Russia."
So Putin took over as president, and 3 months after that, won his first election. But just because Putin won the presidency, that didn't mean he had all the power. This is Michael McFaul.
I was U.S. ambassador from 2012 to 2014. In the 1990s, there was a fire sale of all the things worth owning in Russia, and certain people,
the oligarchs,
did better than others in that fire sale, sometimes called privatization, and those people tended to be well connected with the Yeltsin regime, and they weren't Putin's friends.
But they probably miscalculated, thinking that they could easily find a way to influence him. It became impossible almost from the start.
From that very moment, there was warfare between him and the oligarchs.
That's when Putin gave the oligarchs a choice. Putin's way?
Some of those people from the 90s managed to figure out a new way of dealing with Putin and have survived.
Or prison.
Others could not find common vision, and so they lost their assets.
Khodorkovsky once was Russia's richest person, worth $15 billion, but he ran afoul of President Vladimir Putin and spent a decade in prison.
With domestic power consolidated, Putin focused on restoring Russia's global influence.
Putin is the guy who believes in the expansionist Russian state. Georgia and Ukraine and all the other Soviet republics that split off when the Soviet Union fell apart, he still believes that they're traditional Russian satellites. A lot of his strategy is about keeping them in the orbit. That Yeltsin line, take good care of Russia, that's how he understands it.
And he used annexation and invasion, as well as oil, gas, and trade to keep former Soviet republics in Russia's orbit. In 2008, Putin's 2 terms were up, and he decided to step down as president. Dmitry Medvedev stepped in as president, and Putin went back to prime minister. But really,
Putin never left power. He pretty much continued running the country, and Medvedev was a bit of a figurehead.
There was actually a period of cooperation between Russia and the U.S. that benefited both countries during Medvedev's presidency.
Because Medvedev did not have the same negative attitude towards the West as Putin did.
But when Putin came back to run for a 3rd term, in the lead up to the 2012 election, it is widely believed that both the presidential and parliamentary elections were rigged, and Russians took to the streets. Putin blamed the protests squarely on America, and more specifically, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
He believed that she had sent, and this is his words, a signal to demonstrators.
Still, Putin won by a huge margin and set about crushing the protest movement immediately upon his return to the Kremlin. Over the next few years, Russia's economy tumbled. Putin annexed Crimea, leading to sanctions. The price of oil fell drastically. The ruble hit a new low, and America played down Russia's influence, with Obama calling Russia a regional power. Despite all of that, Putin's approval rating remained sky high, and then an opportunity for payback.
I think I'd get along very well with Vladimir Putin.
In 2016, there was one candidate who called Vladimir Putin very smart.
Trump exhibited tolerance towards Putin's actions annexing Crimea, and similar views on NATO and sanctions.
Secretary Clinton didn't support any of those views.
Even though Putin denies any wrongdoing,
U.S. elections.
Yes.
the U.S. has accused Russia of being behind the leaking of 20,000 Democratic National Committee emails, which many say helped Trump beat Hillary Clinton in the presidential election. Which leaves us here, with the possibility of a President Putin until 2024, positioning Russia to be the world power he always imagined it should be.
Jack Ma is Asia's richest man and most recognizable business tycoon. He's the chairman of Alibaba, China's e-commerce giant and one of the 10 largest companies in the world, yet he still wants more.
We know where we're going. We want to be the 5th largest economy.
Big words from the man some call Asia's Jeff Bezos. He's confident, he's charismatic, and he's definitely not the average CEO. This is how a poor school teacher went from the classroom to being one of the most influential multi-billionaires in the world. Ma was born in China's southeastern city Hangzhou in 1964. His parents were traditional musician storytellers. As a teenager, he started to learn English from foreign tourists after China opened up in the late 1970s.
And then for 9 years, Jack Ma hung around outside the Hangzhou Hotel, which is now called the Shangri-La. He would get up at 5 a.m. to talk to travelers.
That's Bloomberg technology reporter Lulu Chen.
And I cover China Internet for Bloomberg.
Ma failed China's National University entrance exam twice before being admitted to local teachers' college. He graduated in 1988. He applied for 30 jobs and got rejected, including from the fast food giant KFC.
When KFC came to China, come to us say,
24 people went for the job. 23 people accepted. I was the only guy.
Then Ma got a job at a local university and taught English there for about 5 years, earning just $15 a month. On the side, he started a translation company with several friends. During a company trip to the US in 1995, Ma had his first encounter with the internet at a friend's place in Seattle.
I searched the first word, beer. I don't know why, because it's easy to spell, baby. And I see beers from Germany, beers from USA, beers from Japan, but there's no beer from China.
So he searched for the word China instead and still couldn't find anything. And that got him thinking. He wanted to build something that would put China on the world's map.
He started China Pages, a Yellow Pages-like website, but it didn't take off. Then Ma joined a government agency in Beijing to help set up a website. By 1999, the internet stock boom had gripped Wall Street, and back in his Hangzhou apartment, Ma decided to try again. With his wife and a group of friends, Ma raised $80,000 and set up Alibaba, a site that allowed businesses to sell stuff to each other.
人家美国人强就强它的硬件，强就强它的系统建设，这方面确实比你高。但是玩信息玩软的，中国人的脑袋绝不比你们长。我们在座的所有人的脑袋绝不比你们长。
By 2000, Alibaba had raised $25 million from investors, including Goldman Sachs and SoftBank.
He had no business plan and zero revenue, but his eyes was very strong eyes.
In 2003, Alibaba started Taobao, a platform for individual sellers to trade with each other, and publicly declared war against eBay, who had started to make a foray into China.
Jack Ma has this famous saying that Alibaba is a crocodile in the Yangtze River, whereas eBay is a shark in the ocean. And if they fight eBay in the ocean, then they'll lose. But if they fight them in the Yangtze River, then they have a home base advantage.
In 2007, just 1 year after it forced eBay out of China, Alibaba debuted its business-facing division on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. But it delisted 5 years later as its performance sagged. But in 2014, Alibaba raised $25 billion in the world's biggest IPO in New York.
Everybody should have a dream. What if that dream comes true?
After achieving dominance in the business of e-commerce in China, Alibaba has been building an internet empire worth $472 billion, with businesses in cloud computing, online video streaming, movie production, healthcare, sports, retail, and even news media.
Alibaba buying into South China Morning Post really raised eyebrows. This is the largest English newspaper in Hong Kong, and it shows that Jack Ma's ambitions weren't limited to e-commerce. He wanted to influence not just Chinese users, but also overseas users as well.
The US has criticized Alibaba for allowing companies to sell counterfeit and poorly made goods, but in China, it enjoys the favor of China's government. It's part of Ma's company philosophy.
In love with the government, but don't marry with them.
Jack Ma's an extremely fortunate man for jumping on the internet sector so early. Note that this is a person who has no coding skills at all. He's a natural showman and a gifted public speaker and really able to convince others to believe in his vision.
Ma's vision of growing Alibaba to be the world's 5th largest economy faces strong competition at home and abroad. It will require more than just naked ambition and charisma, but Ma is great at getting himself in the right place at the right time. So far, it served him well.
Peter Thiel is a walking contradiction. He got his bachelor's and Juris Doctorate from Stanford, but speaks out about the horrors of higher education, saying college is
as corrupt as the Catholic Church was 500 years ago.
He's a staunch supporter of the free press, yet he bankrolled a lawsuit to bankrupt an independent media company.
But these were not journalists.
And most of all, he's an immigrant libertarian who's the most public supporter of Donald Trump in all of Silicon Valley.
What Trump represents isn't crazy, and it's not going away.
This is the story of how an openly gay, immigrant genius, libertarian billionaire went from tech contrarian to Silicon Valley's biggest Trump supporter. Peter Thiel was born on October 11, 1967 in Frankfurt, West Germany, to Suzanne and Klaus Thiel. Peter's family emigrated to Cleveland, Ohio when he was 1. An Ayn Rand devotee during his youth, Thiel attended Stanford University majoring in philosophy.
His Stanford experience shaped a really big part of who he decided to surround himself with.
That's Lizette Chapman.
And I cover technology and venture capital here at Bloomberg.
He and his Stanford friends made their first big splash in tech with PayPal. After selling to eBay for $1.5 billion, they would become known as the PayPal Mafia for each incredible success after PayPal. For Thiel, that began with an early, modest $500,000 investment in Facebook.
And in VC speak, early means big risk, but also big reward. He turned that initial $500,000 investment into more than $1 billion in cash.
But Thiel was just getting started with Facebook, and he went on to make a whole bunch of wildly successful investments.
From SpaceX to Airbnb to one of the largest, most powerful companies in the United States, if not the world, and of course that's Palantir.
The incredibly controversial secretive data mining startup he founded with his colleagues from PayPal. It connects data silos and then allows non-technical people to search that information for patterns. Data like
financial information, feeds from video cameras, biometric details, passport information, flight manifest.
Palantir doesn't talk much about how they collect this data, who has access to it, or what they do with it. But they have contracts with
the Department of Homeland Security and the CIA and the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission.
And several other federal agencies. It's the richest company you've never heard of, valued at $20 billion. But there are plenty of obscenely wealthy people in Silicon Valley. What makes him different...
He's a complex ball of multiple contradictions.
Take college, for example. Even though college was extremely important for Thiel, there's something called the Thiel Fellowship.
In exchange for dropping out and a promise not to pursue college, Thiel would give them $100,000 each.
You basically tell people that if you get a diploma, you're saved. Otherwise you go to hell. You go to Yale or you go to jail.
Also, his relationship with the press.
Here's another contradiction. He's donated to free press initiatives, including the Committee to Protect Journalists.
But he also secretly spent tens of millions of dollars bankrolling a lawsuit filed by Hulk Hogan over the publication of a sex tape and bankrupting the independently run Gawker Media. Why did he do this? Because in 2007, one of Gawker Media's blogs, Value-Ag, outed him as gay. And with the lawsuit, he
found an opportunity to get back at them by funding the lawsuit that Hulk Hogan was able to bring then, but he wouldn't have been able to do that without Thiel's money.
And finally, Thiel's biggest contradiction, his endorsement of Donald Trump.
When he was asked about his support for Trump, he was surprised at the outrage that came with it from many of his colleagues in Silicon Valley. He didn't want more of the establishment.
No matter how crazy this election seems, it is less crazy than the condition of our country.
After briefly supporting Carly Fiorina in the primaries, Thiel pivoted to Trump, donating $1.25 million to Trump and his associated super PACs in October 2016. And he didn't just help Trump financially. He gave a full-throated keynote speech supporting Trump at the Republican National Convention.
I'm not a politician, but neither is Donald Trump. He is a builder, and it's time to rebuild America.
And when Trump was finally elected, Thiel was given the reins to an enormous amount of power.
And I want to thank you, man. You had a very special guy.
He was named the transitional advisor. And in that role, he did a lot of interviewing and a lot of vetting to fill hundreds of cabinet positions and different jobs within the administration.
But it turns out Thiel's support isn't unconditional.
Talking to people who spend time with him, I have also heard that he is no longer a great supporter of Trump.
It was reported that Thiel was unhappy with the direction of Trump's presidency. Ever since, he's been mum, making no public appearances, no statements, and staying out of the spotlight altogether. Although there have been suggestions that Trump could tap Thiel for a top intelligence post or ambassadorship, there's no indication he'd accept.
He's described his relationship with politics as schizophrenic. He gets really involved, and then he runs away as fast as possible.
Whether Thiel takes a new position or simply continues as a board director at Facebook and Palantir, at just 50 years old, he's primed to wield some serious influence in technology and politics for decades to come.
Two 2016 was again the hottest year on record, and the previous 17 years have seen our 16 most scorching. Scientists overwhelmingly agree. Global warming is the culprit. And it's just getting started. Ice caps, extreme weather, wildfires, droughts, and the hits keep coming. What are we doing about it? In 2015, the world took its boldest step yet to stem climate change with a historic accord in Paris. But now comes the hard part. Nations must change energy policies and invest huge amounts of money, and they will likely do it without the United States. President Donald Trump announced on June 1st that the U.S. would withdraw from the accord.
The reality is that withdrawing is in America's economic interest and won't matter much to the climate.
Here's the situation. Decades in the making, the Paris Agreement united the U.S., China, and more than 190 other nations in a push to limit fossil fuel pollution. The The UN-sponsored plan secured pledges to cut greenhouse gases, the emissions that trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere, in an effort to avoid the rising seas and other environmental disasters that climate models predict. But even if all pledges are met, the globe is expected to warm by as much as 3.4 degrees Celsius this century, more than the UN target of well below 2 degrees. Meeting the Paris Agreement means that governments will have to offer more incentives for clean energy, scale back support for fossil fuels, make emissions more costly, and reduce deforestation. It's estimated that the deal will require $13.5 trillion of spending through 2030. Here's the argument. Unlike past climate pacts such as the Kyoto Protocol, each country set its own Paris targets and then promised to revisit and improve them. The U.S. was primed to play a lead role in climate change, but Trump's Energy Independence Executive Order reverses Obama-era rules and directives put in place to combat climate change, and expands production of coal, the dirtiest fossil fuel. The resulting policies threaten the global fight against climate change. Without the U.S. commitment to emissions reduction, other countries may join it in abandoning the Paris Agreement. This could make it almost impossible and even more expensive down the line to stop climate change. Optimists argue that the shift to a lower carbon future is already underway. Businesses, cities, and U.S. states, such as California, are already investing in wind and solar and taking other steps to make it work.
I've actually been called an environmentalist, if you can believe that.
There's an inherent attraction to light and being human. And I think on a very deep psychological level, light is this way in which we experience the energy surrounding us in a very personal manner. My name is Matt Dilling. I'm the founder of Light Bright Neon Studio, and we manufacture, produce, and restore neon works of art and design. origins of the creative content of a lot of the work at Lightbright comes from a variety of sources. Sometimes people come with a napkin sketch. Some people come with an Adobe Illustrator file. And we have a whole design team who then we kind of work together to help create layouts of what it might look like. Scale it up and create a paper template using a pen plotter. And that paper template actually becomes our guide for what we're going to bend the neon to. We take from the office into the glass shop. We pick out the right size tubing with the right color for the right size project. From there, we heat up the glass tubing. The torches heat the glass well in excess of 1,000 degrees in order for it to get into its molten state. We heat up and bend the glass tubing to match the template. One of our chandeliers has over 100 different bends in it. So each one of those bends has to be marked for a heated up bend. We also have to allow the glass to cool between the bends so that the next area can be worked on and heated up in its own unique fashion. It turns into spaghetti, and then we have to make sure that that spaghetti lines back up and cools to the template. We use a blow hose to connect our mouth to the tube, create a volume that's closed, and we can control the pressure in there with our mouth. There's just a variety of challenges that come up inherently in working with glass. Glass can crack due to stress, and sometimes you'll just have a batch that all it wants to do when it gets near a torch is crack. After we've bent various components, we have to go in using the crossfire or the hand torch and actually weld all of those pieces together. The last step on that is then to weld on electrodes onto either end. Each one of those steps is very, very specific. I draw inspiration from so many different experiences. It's hard to come up with one thing that's particular, but one of the ways that I really am able to connect with the creative is to float. Floating is a similar experience to meditation, to psychedelics. Going into a blackened room and laying out in a body of water and salt that's heated to your body temperature, and it allows for all sort of external stimulation to fall away. And your internal world really begins to bubble up and manifest. You really get to experience a different relationship to your mind. I think I work with neon because I can't not work with it. It's so challenging and so rewarding. And those things are so intertwined that there's no way of separating it out. I learn so much and continue to learn so much by working with it. I find so much inspiration in working with it, and I just continue to experience new and different things through the medium. It's that close to me at this point. Once the neon tube is completed, we have to hook it up to our manifold for bombarding. The manifold is opened, a vacuum is drawn. We check the tube for leaks with our Tesla coil. We close the tube back off, and we heat it up using a very large and powerful transformer. As the tube is heated up, it releases anything that's not inert inside the tube, and we evacuate that out. We introduce the gas into it, and we seal the tube off, sealing into that tube whatever gas we introduced into it. I think my favorite part of making a neon light is when you see it lit up for the first time. Different gases, when electrified, emit different wavelengths of light. Neon gas is this very bright orange, fiery red color. Argon gas creates a very intense blue, but that light output that is produced can then be expressed in a different wavelength by coating the inside of the tubes with a phosphor coating that takes that one wavelength of light and emits at different wavelengths. bring it over to the aging table, where we hook it up to an age-in transformer and allow it to settle, age the gas in that we've introduced to it. There's always a stray particle of something left inside the tube. But that time that the oxide coating can act to scrub whatever is left inside the tube while things are getting settled into place. Once the tubes are aged in, we move on to our process of assembling two halves of the fixture together in a jig, gluing up the center of the fixture to its spindle. Once the adhesive dried, we would connect the wires from the fixture together into a transformer, and we turn on power and it lights up. Part of what we love about what we do here is that we try and put out into the world the kind of things that we'd like to see. I still am surprised when it lights up. I'm still excited when I get to see it illuminated. There's an ineffable quality to it. To me, is this insight into the inner workings of the universe. It literally is. It's a way of looking at what is surrounding us in the cosmos in a new light.
bit like an addiction. You've got to make something. You have to do something. It's borderline obsession. And every bike we build is my favourite bike at the time, and as soon as it's done, I want to build another one. Spend cycles is something I've been thinking about ever since I started cycling in my late teens. We want bikes that ultimately you'll really enjoy riding. There's never a bike that's the same. There's always a slight change. And as we build them individually as well, they have the marks of a bike that's built by hand. Most people I know cycle have an idea of their dream bicycle. And it may be an evolving idea you've had in your head. And we've worked with a lot of people that have come to us with sketches and scrapbooks. It's really, really nice to build something that's just one-off and unique. I think a lot of people see a bicycle as two wheels and a frame in the middle. There are a lot of subtle changes and nuances in design which can change the riding characteristics quite dramatically. I'm a really big fan of modernist architecture, and the simplicity of a modernist building is really hard to achieve. And with some of our bikes, they may look very simple, but I think people should not underestimate the time and effort that goes into designing a product. Tubing is key to a bike's feel and ride. Reynolds tubing has been in my life ever since I can remember. Growing up, I could never afford a frame manufactured with their tubing. We can now put a badge on our bike saying manufactured Reynolds, which is a sort of thing as a kid I just wouldn't have believed was going to happen. Every part of the bike has a specific tube. It's not universal. The first thing we do is get the tubes out, check they're correct, check the wall thicknesses, sand the edges, make sure it's all really clean, because if it's not clean, the tubes won't join together correctly. We build in steel because I still believe it's one of the best materials to use. It's been used in bikes since the late 1800s, and they're still using it now for a very good reason. It's the flexibility that we can replace the tube, repaint the bike, and you wouldn't know it's damaged. I just like working with it. It's very sculptural. This isn't sort of aerospace precision engineering. It's a steel rule and a marker. So when we're cutting the tubes, it's within a mil or two. But what we're trying to do is take the best from bicycle building in the past and add a little bit of modern flair to it. There's various techniques for building bicycles. We do a thing called fillet brazing, where you connect a pipe together. We use a bronze rod and a flame. We heat the tubes up to the same temperature and we fill the joint with bronze. And it gives a very, very sort of fluid, lovely, sort of quite sculptural feel. You've got to practice. You've got to be able to judge material temperatures. You've got to just look at it and you just get a feel for it. It's the stage where your tubes start to look a bit like a bicycle. My father's a jeweller. He'd make sort of very pretty things, which are lovely, but for me, they don't really have any function. What I love about bicycles, you can start on a Monday with a box of tubes, you can be riding it by the weekend, and it can last you for the rest of your life. Outside of the frame and forks, the other most important part is the wheels and tyres. When you build the wheels, you have to lace them, so there's little holes going all the way around the rim. You poke the spoke through. We do build all our wheels by hand here because a machine can't get 30 years worth of wheel building experience. Colour is very, very personal. With any of our bikes, you can have them painted whatever colour you want. We've matched one to a teapot, so we can get that scanned and we can match that, or someone's favourite item of clothing. I like to let the bike sit for 4 or 5 days minimum, just so the paint can have time to cure a little bit, and then we assemble it. We get out all the new components, and it's a case of putting them together. Some bikes you can assemble in 3 hours, some will take 3 days. And we've built bikes that cost in the £10,000 plus mark. Some people, they're saving up and this is their bike and they're going to own it for the rest of their lives. So we just want to make sure they get the right thing. I think the bike for me was the first time I had some freedom. So as soon as I had one, I was off. A lot of people still get that thrill as when they were a kid blasting down a hill, wind going through their hair. It's fun. Everyone has their favourite jacket or something that just makes them feel good. If you've got a bike that fits well, you actually feel part of it. building bicycles as a creative outlet is fantastic. It's not something you do because you're going to get a big paycheck at the end of the day. You do it something you have a passion for it.
If you ever saw a wooden surfboard, it was probably hanging in somebody's house or underneath the deck. But kind of in the last 10 or 15 years, wood has made a big comeback. They surf wonderfully. It's beautiful and it feels great to be on one of them. I always had a love for wood and kind of passionate about things that went in the water. I've kind of been around wooden boats most of my life. There's just so much character. The way they're built, the stories that come with them, a lot of that has translated over to why we build surfboards the way we do. When we first started thinking about building surfboards, wood was the natural material we chose. They have a very high strength to weight ratio. Wooden surfboards have the longest history of use in the surf world than any other material. People have been surfing wooden surfboards since kind of the first documented history of people riding waves. The board starts in CAD, where we take a 3D model, break down the shape, and kind of create frames and templates and all the inner parts of the board that we get cut on a CNC machine. We take those frames and we just pop them out, assemble the frame into kind of a skeleton. We go out to our lumber shed, pick a bunch of cedar, and bring them into our mill shop, put glue along the edges, clamp it all together into a panel. Everything's book matched. You have symmetry in the colors and texture of the wood. Cut your outline. Take our assembled frame, gently put it down right on top of the plank. Once that foundation is started, you're basically building up the three-dimensional shape, the outside part of the board, using lots of strips that kind of interlock and fit together. Every piece of wood is going to be different, and it's all going to react differently. There are frustrations with it, but I think that's one of the things that keeps it challenging. You learn to read the kind of what the grain lines are doing and what the color of the wood is telling you. Once those rails are cleaned up, we put our top planks on. It's a little bit like putting a lid on a box. It's like, this is it. Whatever's inside that board is staying inside that board. And by tensioning some rope, you can clamp the two together. It's like a time capsule. What makes our boards unique are they are built right here in York. They're built using material that grows right here in the state of Maine. They're built 100% by hand by local craftspeople and surfers. There's a lot of time that goes into these boards, between 40 and 60 hours start to finish. We wanted to build surfboards that were as hollow as they could be, but still be strong enough to work well. Too light and they don't surf well, but too heavy and they don't surf well. So there's a balance point there, and that's where we try to be. Taking the board off the rocker table once the top has gone on, that is by far one of my top favorite parts. It's just you and a shaping stand, a board, and a hand plane. Everything else is out of your view. It's simple, it's pleasurable, it's quiet. You can be with your thoughts and you can just kind of be present. There's something about taking a nice sharp edge tool to a beautiful piece of wood and feeling the curls coming off and knowing that every pass that you're making, you're kind of getting it closer and closer to what you have in mind. Once we've shaped it down and the board's looking like it's supposed to look like, time for it to go into the glassing room. 4-ounce fiberglass, laying it over the board, draping it over the edges, cutting it, applying epoxy, and on the board. Once both sides are lamb coated, it's time to put in the hardware. Drill and router and install the fin box. And on the other side, we drill and put in the leash plug and a vent. There's a lot of air just naturally inside the board, and that air wants to expand and contract with temperature changes. And that vent has a little piece of Gore-Tex fabric in it, and it allows air to kind of breathe both ways, but it doesn't allow water to get in. Once all that hardware is put in, it goes back into the glassing room. We brush a nice, beautiful, thick coat of epoxy over the whole surface, and that we call a gloss coat. That's supposed to look beautiful and glossy and shiny and flawless. You get to see that board come to life. Whatever the colors in the wood, they really come out. It just makes it look like candy. You just want to touch it and run your hands down it, and it's just kind of the icing on the cake. Once everything is hard, we put it into what we call the oven, get that epoxy to cure, really kind of bake it, and just get it to harden. Put in the fin, screw in the vent, and ship it out. We just love the idea of building something that's sustainable and long-lasting and made by hand. Kind of gives you a deeper connection to the product over something you might buy on a shelf. When a customer gets the board, they feel it. They 100% feel the amount of work and the amount of passion that went into the board. So I'm not really looking at hours and efficiency. We're looking at like doing it right and enjoying it as we go.
Ma Baoli, better known as Gang La, is one of the 4 Grand Marshals leading New York's Pride Parade this year. But in the country he comes from, being gay is still a social taboo. The CEO of a Beijing-based internet company is on a mission to improve the lives of millions of gay men in China.
对于每一个 LGBT 人群来说，即使这个国家不允许你跟同性爱人结婚，但是你仍然要勇敢地去选择你自己的生活，你仍然应该拥有幸福生活的权利。
Ma's company Blue City runs an app and a website specifically for gay men. Blued is one of the biggest gay social networking apps in the world, with an estimated 30 million registered users. Unlike most other apps, Blued is more than just dating or hookups.
大家可以在我们这个软件里面找他自己的情感，然后可以阅读相关的内容，然后可以进行一些娱乐，比如玩游戏啊，比如看直播啊等等。
Back in 2000, when Ma studied at a police school in northern China, he realized he didn't feel like everyone else.
因为他们都找女朋友，然后谈恋爱，但是我对长得好看的同性的男生，我反而觉得对我更有吸引力。所以那个时候我就到互联网上去找这样的一些资料，然后希望能够告诉我自己我到底是谁。互联网上所有的信息都是负面的，都是错的，就是说同性恋要电击疗法，要被治疗，然后要吃药等等。
After visiting some foreign websites with different attitudes to homosexuality, Ma created his own site for a Chinese audience, encouraging people that
他们也是正常的，他们不用自卑，然后也不用自杀。
Even though attitudes towards homosexuals are slowly changing in China, it's still a social stigma. The virtual world of Blued, where members can be open about their sexuality, is for most a striking contrast to their real lives. This is live streaming, a function added to Blued in late 2015, right as the internet craze was starting to take off in China. Many self-made stars like Jin make decent amounts of money by receiving audiences virtual currencies and gifts.
我们不是彼此的初恋，我们初恋这种事儿多不靠谱啊。
For Kyle and Klaus, a couple who have come out, live streaming on Blued means something different.
其实我经常会收到很多粉丝的一些互动的留言，就是类似就是说你们让我们看到了同志情侣之间的一些希望啊，我看到这样的留言我是很欣慰。
The government's rules for acceptable content online may shift quickly in China, with LGBT material in a grey area. Many companies feel the chill of the recent internet crackdown, but Blue City still runs as usual. Ma has won the Chinese government's trust by helping with HIV prevention among gay men. A third of the company's staff are dedicated to screening pornographic and politically sensitive content.
我不太多的愿意去对抗，我更多的愿意去对话，去改变他们的想法。我觉得这个可能在中国来说是更有效的。
In the past 5 years, Blue City has grown from a team of 7 people to a promising business with about 250 staff. Ma said the company earned over $15 million last year, mainly through advertising and selling virtual currencies to live streaming audiences. Now the company is expanding overseas.
我希望吧，通过我们的努力，布鲁蒂能够成为全球第一家在美国纳斯达克或者是纽交所上市的这样的同质互联网公司。
This is Rich Chiga. He's a Chinese rapper by way of Indonesia, and he's very popular on the internet. This is Joji. He's a Japanese-Australian singer, and he's also very popular on the internet. Plus, Joji invented the Harlem Shake meme. Let me say that again. This guy, Joji, in the blood bathtub, invented the Harlem Shake meme. But we'll come back to that. So Rich and Joji are both signed to 88 Rising, an entertainment company hoping to build a lasting global brand that will outlive singular moments of virality. They primarily create content combining Asian culture and hip-hop, a formula that apparently pleases the internet gods greatly. They've only been around for 18 months, but they're already putting up major label numbers.
I think that we have an unprecedented collective of talent, a group of like predominantly Asian artists, you know, really like making waves globally, which from an independent point of view as well.
88's founder, Sean Miyashiro, cut his teeth launching Vice's electronic music channel, Thump. But quickly, Sean became interested in life beyond dance music.
I knew that after launching a whole content platform that I have kind of the ability and the know-how to do it again, but like for what was the question.
So Sean moved to the Bronx to start over and figure it out. He couldn't afford an office space, so he worked out of his car at the top of a grimy parking garage.
Everything kind of started here. If you look around, this is my environment. This is my serenity, really. 88 Rising was built here. Built on the grounds of LA Fitness, residence in a parking garage. I was living in the Bronx. I'm just like, damn, where the hell do I go? So I just come up here and I I just kind of figure things out every single day. Being like, okay, what the hell is this thing? Coming here was kind of like my own kind of private office, basically. Like, to be honest, I would even go to the bathroom here. I would like take pisses here, you know what I mean? Like, it was, it's just too far to go back down there. When I need Wi-Fi, I'd spend a good part of the day at Dunkin' Donuts. Hi, how are you? Can I get a chicken snack wrap?
Before 88 Rising officially launched, Sean caught a surprise break in the form of a Twitter friendship with a funny 16-year-old kid from Indonesia named Brian, who taught himself English by watching Rubik's Cube tutorial videos on YouTube. Seriously, that's true.
I thought his Twitter was genius, from the future, just crazy. And like just the shit that he was saying, like the memes he was making. But I didn't know that he rapped or anything like that. I really didn't. And he came up with Dat Stick like 2 weeks later.
12 in the morning, pop shells for a living and baby gon' smell blood trail every minute, bro.
Dat Stick was Brian's first ever attempt at making a rap song, and it immediately went viral.
Everything was great about it. But the one thing that I noticed is the song was hard as hell. Just like everything about it, man. Just like, it was menacing, bro.
Soon after the video dropped, Brian signed with 88 Rising.
I'll FaceTime with Rich. Sorry for calling you Rich Chiga on my phone, Rich. Brian, he gets like super pissed off that he's saved in my phone as Rich Chiga. He's like, dude, am I not a human to you? What's good, bro?
What's good, brother?
How you doing?
Doing great. I just did sound check.
How was it?
It was tight.
Hold his thick blocks, but you been a bitch, suck a thick cock.
So, Brian could definitely rap, but some viewers understandably took offense at a Chinese kid satirizing rap cliches and calling himself Rich Chiga. But if a group of well-known rappers saw the video and genuinely liked it, that could at least help validate Brian as a legit hip-hop artist. Plus, it could be really funny.
It was just kind of an idea that I just had on the spot. Everything that rappers say is better and funnier and smarter and wittier. You know, it's just more entertaining. We just edit it as tight as possible, put it up, and
it really worked.
12 in the morning, pop shows.
Yo, this nigga got a pouch on and a Reebok pouch. This is the hardest nigga of all time.
You said when you come for a trigger like me. That was dope.
Like, it's just lit, and I think people would take it as a joke at first, but it's like if he ran with that and kept doing more videos like that, it's just lit.
You know, I'd never been to America before, and like all of a sudden, just like I see like all the rappers that I listen to just like reacting to my stuff, and I was like, what? How did this happen?
The reaction video also went viral, and even led to a remix of Dat Stick featuring Wu-Tang's Ghostface.
I'll get on that track. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Really, on the remix?
Yeah. Oh, you know him?
And yeah, the remix went viral too. Brian has since acknowledged the misstep in his name and claims he may change it. But for the time being, he's still Rich Chigga to his fans. An ever-growing global audience, hungry for more releases from emerging talent around the world.
I didn't know that it was gonna be this impactful and this important to people, and I'm very thankful and blessed that it has. And every day now that I wake up, it's like it's just like a new mission every day.
A major part of that mission involves Joji. Remember the bloody bath guy? He's a former YouTube personality in the middle of a career transition.
The sound of this song, Will He, it's like a trap song that you can like slow dance to. Awkward prom shit, you know what I mean? I used to do crazy episodic internet videos. It was going well, and one day it was me and a few friends just in a room. We were casually chilling, and then someone plays the song, and it's brand new at the time. I happened to have a lot of costumes laying around, so I told the other guys, I was like, get in these costumes and let's just dance to it, like who cares? We were like, okay, let's just go crazy at the drop. So that video goes up, I go to sleep, and the next morning, everyone's doing it, like next morning. That taught me a lot about the internet, how people want to just be a part of something. And from that point on, something changed, and I was a little better at understanding demographics and people and what they want to see and what they want to hear. I was friends with a couple other artists who were affiliated with 88, and then I also started to realize that 88 is the bridge between Western and Asian entertainment, and I really wanted to be a part of that.
Joji just released the In Tongues EP, his first project as a serious artist.
Joji's In Tongues record came out a couple weeks ago. It's #2 on Billboard on the R&B charts, which is crazy for, independent release, and he's like a brand new artist.
And the success is even more impressive, knowing he went from creating something like this,
"It's just Taco Bell, what could possibly go wrong?"
to creating something like this, the newest music video for his song Demons.